Someone deceived you about Gene Hackman, and more than 800,000 people fell for it. A video spread across the internet in March 2025 claiming that FBI agents had stormed Gene Hackman's home, uncovered a hidden tunnel beneath his private library, and discovered something so shocking it rocked all of Hollywood. On February 8, 2025, Betsy Arakawa sat down at her computer searching desperately for answers. Court-ordered investigation records released later would reveal her search history in haunting detail. She was looking up COVID-19 symptoms, flu symptoms, whether COVID could cause dizziness, whether it could cause nosebleeds. That same morning, she emailed her massage therapist and mentioned that Gene had woken up not feeling well, with flu-like symptoms. She said his COVID test had come back negative, but she was postponing the appointment just to be safe. She was concerned about him. She was always concerned about him. She was so consumed with keeping Gene protected that she may not have fully noticed how ill she herself was already becoming. On February 11, 2025, Betsy ran her final errands. Security camera footage captured her that afternoon moving from one store to the next, a grocery store, a pharmacy, a pet store. As she always did when she stepped outside, she wore a mask, because she lived in fear of carrying any sickness back to Gene. She returned home that evening. That was the last time any camera recorded Betsy Arakawa alive. But that is where the investigation encountered its first major turning point. Investigators originally announced that Betsy had passed away around February 11th. Then her cell phone records appended everything. A former FBI investigator named Bill Daley told Fox News exclusively that those phone records were crucial, not just because of the calls themselves, but because they would reveal her physical movements. When the records came back, they showed that Betsy's phone had been active on the morning of February 12th. 3 calls were placed from her phone that morning, all of them to Cloudberry Health, a private medical service in Santa Fe. 1 call came back from Cloudberry that same afternoon and showed up as a missed call on her phone. She never picked up. The sheriff's office publicly confirmed the updated timeline. Betsy Arakawa was still alive on the morning of February 12th, and she was desperately reaching out for medical help. The doctor who spoke with her that morning said she described feeling congested. She did not sound critically ill. She asked about hyperbaric therapy. An appointment was scheduled for 1:15 that afternoon. She never showed up. She never answered the follow-up call. The doctor later said he believed she simply had no idea how dangerously sick she had already become. Betsy Arakawa died of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. The vast majority of Americans have never heard of this illness, and for good reason. It is extraordinarily rare, and it is terrifying in how rapidly it progresses. It spreads from rodents through their droppings, urine, and saliva. The official investigation included an environmental review of the Hackman property that turned up rodent droppings in several of the outbuildings on the grounds. Live traps had already been placed around the property. The surrounding desert landscape, the Pinon and Juniper Hills of New Mexico, is precisely the kind of terrain where mice thrive and where hantavirus quietly exists within the ecosystem, lying in wait for accidental human exposure. Betsy may have come into contact with it without ever realizing it had happened. The illness begins like a bad case of the flu: fever, body aches, exhaustion. Then the lungs start filling with fluid. New Mexico's chief medical investigator, Dr. Heather Gerald, explained at the official press conference that once a patient enters the pulmonary phase, they can die within 24 to 48 hours without medical intervention. There is no slow deterioration. It simply overtakes you faster than you can prepare for. Betsy Arakawa died on her bathroom floor. She was found lying near a space heater, still dressed in her regular clothes. She was 65 years old. And Gene Hackman, 95 years old, living with what the medical examiner would later describe as advanced Alzheimer's disease, compounded by severe heart disease and serious kidney damage from chronically high blood pressure, was somewhere else in that same house. Investigators and medical experts who reviewed the case said it was entirely plausible that he had no awareness his wife had died. His Alzheimer's had progressed to the point where he may have been completely unable to process what was unfolding around him. He could not call for help. He could not connect the image of his wife lying on the bathroom floor to the need to pick up a phone and clearly explain what had happened. His pacemaker ultimately became the critical piece of evidence that identified the moment he died. It recorded an abnormal event on February 17th, and investigators concluded he most likely passed away around February 18th. That means Gene Hackman spent approximately 1 week alone in that house, with his wife's body lying in a bathroom on the other side of the building. When investigators found him, he was in the mudroom. His cane was on the floor beside him. His sunglasses were lying nearby. There was no food in his stomach. He had not eaten for a significant period before his death. Body camera footage released later under court order showed officers moving methodically through the house, room by room. In the footage, an officer can be heard saying quietly, "2 totally separate areas of the house." After discovering Betsy in the bathroom and then crossing to find Gene in the mudroom, the art collection still hung on the walls and shelves. Cash sat counted on a bathroom counter. Prescription medications were photographed exactly where they had been left. Everything was in its place. Nothing had been touched. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. The Hackman family, along with his estate attorneys, fought aggressively to keep those records sealed. They argued in court that Gene and Betsy had dedicated their entire lives to protecting their privacy, and that protection ought to extend even beyond death. The court ruled against them. The records became public in April 2025. Photographs, hours of body camera footage, the complete investigation report, Betsy's computer search history, her cell phone call logs, all of it released over the family's strong objections, because the public had a right to know what had truly happened, rather than continuing to believe a fabricated tunnel story that had already amassed 800,000 views. Jesse Kessler had worked as a personal contractor for the Hackmans for 16 years. He knew their habits. He knew their faces. He knew precisely what that property was supposed to look and feel like when everything was normal. On February 26, 2025, he arrived with a colleague to carry out routine maintenance work. No one answered the door. He reached out to the security officer for the gated community, and together they approached the house and looked through a window. The 911 call Kessler made is part of the public record. "No, they are not moving," he told the dispatcher, his voice barely holding together. "Please send someone out here quick." Gene Hackman, Betsy Arakawa, and one of their 3 dogs were found inside the home. 2 other dogs were still alive. One had managed to survive by getting outside through a doggy door. The dog found in the closet near Betsy's body had no way to escape. It died of dehydration and starvation. Santa Fe County Sheriff Adon Mendoza stood at a press conference and stated publicly that the investigation still had unresolved questions and loose ends requiring further examination, even after the causes of death had been established. He did not detail what those loose ends were. That statement, combined with the initial characterization of the deaths as suspicious enough to warrant a thorough investigation, is precisely where the tunnel rumors took root. People heard the words suspicious and loose ends, and filled in the blanks with the most dramatic scenario they could conjure. A tunnel, hidden bodies, a government conspiracy, FBI raids, an invented story that 800,000 people believed before Snopes published its investigation and declared it entirely false. The real unanswered questions in the Gene Hackman case have nothing to do with tunnels. They are far more unsettling than that. How did 2 people die inside a gated community with a sophisticated private surveillance system, and not a single person on the outside noticed for more than 2 weeks? Why did neither of them have professional caregivers, when Gene was clearly suffering from advanced cognitive decline? Why was Betsy, who was already showing signs of serious illness on the morning of February 12th, so completely focused on her husband's minor cold that she may not have recognized the severity of what was happening inside her own body? Gene had woken up with flu-like symptoms that morning. Betsy emailed her massage therapist about it. She rescheduled to keep him safe. She wore a mask every single time she left the house, to protect him. Right up until her final moments, every choice she made was oriented around his well-being. And the disease that killed her arrived anyway, through the rodent droppings in the outbuildings, through the desert landscape surrounding the private sanctuary they had built together, through the one thing no locked gate can ever keep out. A friend of Gene Hackman's told the Washington Post, "All of us should have been checking on him. I had no idea. It's just really sad. And that she died a week before him. My God. There was no tunnel. There was no FBI raid. There was no German ledger, No iron door, no government conspiracy, no anonymous trust racing to acquire the property. Every one of those details was invented by a YouTube channel that openly acknowledged in its own description that its content was fiction. But what was real, what is documented in court records, body camera footage, cell phone logs, pacemaker data, and a medical investigator's press conference, is more disturbing than any tunnel ever could be. Two people who chose to love each other completely and privately, sealed away from the world in a house they had made their own. A disease that moved faster than anyone could stop. A man whose mind had been so thoroughly taken from him that he could not save his wife, could not call for help, could not do anything but wait. A pacemaker recording the precise moment a legend's heart gave out. A contractor of 16 years peering through a window and seeing something he will carry with him for the rest of his life. That is the real truth about Gene Hackman's house. It was there in the official records the entire time, and it never needed a tunnel to break your heart.